Tonight, breaking news as we come on the air in the West. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. From the north, the east, the south. What's unfolding right now? The images coming in at this hour. And President Biden revealing severe sanctions. Will they be enough? Russian forces attacking Ukraine from nearly every direction. Tonight, the video posted online from inside Ukraine. Russian ground forces crossing the border into Ukraine. U.S. military sources believe the Russians plan to surround Kyiv and, quote, decapitate it. Another concern tonight, Russian troops have reportedly taken full control of the area around the Chernobyl nuclear site, the scene of the world's worst nuclear disaster. Ukraine's military claiming video posted on social media tonight shows 2 Russian helicopters destroyed during a battle. Subways in Ukraine now being used as bomb shelters, crowds of people huddling together. Ukraine's President Zelensky tonight declaring martial law. And tonight, President Biden revealing these new sanctions. The president is pressed. Why not sanction Putin directly? Ian Panel live in Kyiv tonight. Cecilia Vega at the White House. Martha Raddatz in Ukraine with what her Pentagon sources are telling her. And we're one-on-one with Secretary of State Antony Blinken. We ask, could Kyiv fall in the next 24 hours? And the scene in Moscow tonight. James Longman reporting from the streets there as hundreds of Russians protest Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. What our team witnessed, what they did to the protesters on the streets. And here at home tonight, the dangerous winter storm this evening from Texas up into the Northeast. More than 30 states in the path tonight, and authorities are now warning of a difficult morning commute tomorrow. The breaking headline in federal court late today, 3 former Minneapolis police officers found guilty of violating the civil rights of George Floyd. And the pandemic this evening, will another booster be needed? When could one be available? What Moderna is now saying tonight.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening. As we come on the air in the West tonight, it is great to have you with us on a Thursday night, and we're going to begin tonight with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the largest invasion of a neighboring country in Europe since World War II. The Russian military attacking from the south, the north, the east, taking out military installations and moving closer tonight on strategic cities. This evening, the Pentagon believes they could be closing in on the capital of Kyiv. Pentagon officials saying the Russians want to surround the city and, quote, decapitate the government. Tonight, President Biden laying the deaths, the carnage at Putin's feet, telling the American people today and the world that Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, he said, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. All day today, the wrenching images of war, Russian military vehicles and tanks rolling through a Ukrainian checkpoint from Belarus. Images circulating online showing what appear to be Russian helicopters sweeping in during an assault on a military base about 20 miles outside the capital of Kyiv. Another concern tonight, Russian vehicles at Chernobyl nuclear site. The Russians are now in control of that nuclear plant, some 60 miles from Kyiv. Of course, the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster back in 1986, and where there are still vast amounts of dangerous nuclear waste entombed there. Despite Russian claims tonight, reports of some missiles striking civilian targets falling on this neighborhood near the capital. And in Ukraine's second largest city tonight, Ukrainians now taking shelter in the subways in Kharkiv. Parents with their children huddling underground now for safety. Some asking, what does Putin want? Still unclear why this is all happening. The scene at bus and train stations tonight, the desperate attempt to get to safety, and world leaders are already warning tonight of a refugee crisis now looming. President Biden meeting today with his national security team and a virtual meeting with G7 leaders. The president then addressing the American people on Russian banks, the sanctions tonight, and moves to limit exports to Russia. The president saying our allies are in full support of these new sanctions. Moments ago here, I spoke with Secretary of State Blinken. I asked him why not sanction Vladimir Putin himself? And what are they seeing right now around Kyiv? Does the Biden administration tonight believe the capital will fall in the next 24 hours? But we're going to begin tonight with our senior foreign correspondent Ian Panel on the ground in Kyiv again tonight.
Tonight, Russia unleashing a brutal military assault on Ukraine, invading this vast nation from the north, south and east. The attacks seen in videos posted online from inside Ukraine After bitter fighting, Russian forces now reportedly in control of Chernobyl, the destroyed nuclear plant just 60 miles from the capital, Kyiv. US military sources say they believe the Russians are driving on Kyiv to surround and, quote, decapitate the government there. We saw fighter jets flying over the city this morning as emergency air raid sirens wailed. A large number of Russian helicopters seen on social media posts attacking a military base less than 20 miles from the center of the capital, triggering a pitched battle. The Russians launching over 160 ballistic missiles and rockets on military installations across Ukraine, but also reportedly hitting some civilian targets. Here, an enormous unexploded rocket's lodged in the ceiling of an apartment building in Kharkiv, close to the Russian border. And here, a jet missile wedged into a damaged road. Intense fightings reported around Kharkiv, and thousands have been forced to shelter in the subways. Columns of Russian tanks and armoured vehicles are reported to be still pouring across the Ukrainian border tonight. Swarms of helicopters flying in low over the countryside, creating panic and terror for the people living there. Even so, military sources say less than half of Russia's 150,000 troops have entered the country. But they're now facing off against a Ukrainian army of 250,000, but that's less sophisticated and powerful. Europe hasn't seen an invasion of this size since World War II. Martial law's been declared across the country, and all men of fighting age and reservists are being mobilized. The capital's now under curfew, and like other major cities, roads were jammed today, with people trying to flee from the onslaught. There have been massive lines at gas stations, and residents desperate for cash are lining up for hours at ATMs. Three friends, all from Donbass in eastern Ukraine, in Maidan Square, where Ukraine turned its back on Russia in its 2014 revolution, showing support for their country.
We are not afraid. We are ready to defend our country.
Marichka Podolko is a morning news anchor in Ukraine. Tonight, her husband's at war and her children hiding in safety in the West.
I think that's the worst scenario that we could expect. I never expected it to be so bad, but I never expected Ukraine to be so calm and strong.
Шановні громадяни України.
Ukraine's President Zelensky trying to rally his country tonight, but acknowledging their losses. Officials say at least 40 Ukrainian service members have been killed, as well as dozens of civilians. Zelensky saying the fiercest fighting is in the south, where Russians are advancing from Crimea, adding that some Russian soldiers have been captured. Around the world, the Russian offensive is being condemned. The Pentagon tonight saying it'll now deploy 7,000 more US troops to Europe. President Biden met with his national security team this morning and said the world will hold Russia accountable.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
But Biden didn't sanction Putin himself, choosing instead new penalties on 4 more Russian banks and some of the country's elite. Putin's claimed he has no intention of occupying Ukraine and warned other countries not to interfere, threatening retaliation the likes of which, quote, you've never experienced in your history. But tonight, as Russian forces try to push deeper into the heart of the country, the question is how far will Putin go and how long can the Ukrainians hold out?
And so let's bring in Ian Pannell from the Ukrainian capital again with us tonight. And Ian, I want to get to the news breaking as we're on the air tonight. President Zelensky speaking this evening, saying that Putin has made him a target. And what do we know about this ongoing battle outside Kyiv tonight?
Yeah, that's right. President Zelensky saying that he is target number 1, his family now in hiding. And this battle is critical because it's only 20 miles northwest of the capital. Both Ukrainian and Russian forces battling it out for control, and that could decide how much the capital comes under fire. David?
And Ian, I wanted to get back to your reporting there that the Russians are now in control of the Chernobyl nuclear plant. We took World News viewers to the exclusion zone and the communities around it some years back here. We remember, of course, the children, the families hopeful for their futures, but they were always aware of the dangerous nuclear waste that remained there. What are authorities saying about Chernobyl tonight and the security of that facility?
Yeah, I mean, the fighting around Chernobyl certainly raising concerns about the potential for some kind of disaster. But tonight, despite reports that it has fallen into Russian hands, the authorities are insisting that those nuclear facilities are safe and secure. David.
Ian Pannell leading the way with our reporting again tonight. Ian, thank you. And just before we came on the air this evening, we asked Secretary of State Antony Blinken why the U.S. hasn't sanctioned Putin directly, what they're seeing just outside Kyiv right now, and is there a chance that Vladimir Putin goes beyond Ukraine? Secretary Blinken, thanks for coming on again tonight. We heard the president list these new sanctions today against several Russian banks, among other steps being taken. The president also said direct sanctions against Vladimir Putin himself are still on the table here. You've got Putin invading Ukraine from the north, the east, the south, ignoring all calls from the U.S. to stop. So why is the U.S. not sanctioning him right now?
Well, first of all, David, the sanctions that we've taken, not just us, in coordination with European partners and allies, are going to have severe consequences on Russia. Some immediate, some that play out over time. We've taken 10 largest financial institutions holding about 80% of Russia's banking assets, can't do transactions in dollars or for the most part in euros. The ability for Russia to raise money on international markets, we're taking that away. Their ability to import the technology necessary to modernize their economy, to put into critical industries like defense, like aerospace, that too being taken away. And this is going to have a very significant impact. Now, having said that, as the president said, other things remain on the table. If they continue to escalate, we'll have the ability to do the same thing. Is
there any sign here, though, that Putin cares about these sanctions? The threats don't appear to be working so far.
You know, sanctions have an immediate impact. We're seeing that in terms of Russia's currency, in terms of its markets. But the impact is really felt over time as, again, it spreads across the economy about their ability to raise money, to conduct transactions around the world. That will be felt more and more and more over time. So if this continues, the pain will continue, the pain will grow, and that's going to have an effect too.
But to be clear here, you are willing to sanction Putin directly if you have to.
As the president said, everything's on the table, including that.
I want to ask you about the fighting we know that's taking place at a military airfield about 20 miles from the capital of Kyiv. Do we know who's in control of that airfield tonight, and is it possible Kyiv falls in the next 24 hours?
I'm not in a position to comment on exactly what's going on the ground at this moment, but what we do know, and part of the Russian plan has been to put Kyiv in danger, to assault the capital, to go after other major cities. We're seeing forces come in from the north, from the east, from the south, and that's all part of the plan that we've laid out for the world in recent weeks.
You're convinced Putin's going to overthrow this government?
I'm convinced he's going to try to do that.
We've seen Ukrainians fight back the resistance to the Russians in the east. Is there any chance the Ukrainians can hold on here?
You know, one of the things that Vladimir Putin has done, starting back in 2014 when they first went into Ukraine, seizing Crimea, seizing a part of eastern Ukraine, is to totally alienate the Ukrainian people from Russia. Before 2014, actually, Russia was pretty popular in Ukraine. It had a 70% favorability rating. Right now, it's exactly the opposite, more than the opposite. 90% of Ukrainians now, if I can use the word, detest Russia and certainly detest President Putin. My prediction would be that one way or another, they will strongly resist any effort to take away their sovereignty, take away their independence, take away their government.
They'll resist, but can they beat the Russians here?
You know, whether it's in the near term, whether it's in the medium term, whether it's in the long term, I'm convinced that democracy and the independence of Ukraine is going to prevail.
Secretary Blinken, I know you know there are a lot of people watching tonight likely wondering, could Vladimir Putin go further here? The president was asked today, what if this goes beyond Ukraine? And he said, if Putin moves into NATO countries, we will be involved. He said, we will be involved. Is this a possibility?
Is it a possibility that Putin goes beyond Ukraine? Sure, it's a possibility, but there's something very powerful standing in the way of that. There's something we call Article 5 of NATO. That means an attack on one member of NATO is an attack on all members of NATO. The president's been very clear that we will defend every inch of NATO territory. I think that's the most powerful deterrent against President Putin going beyond Ukraine.
You know, the president has said all along U.S. troops will not fight in Ukraine against the Russians. But again, this hypothetical, if he goes beyond Ukraine and into NATO, given what you just cited, that means all bets are off the table here.
Well, it's not a question, David, of all bets being off the table. It's being very clear that we are committed to Article 5. We're committed to defending our NATO allies. And if it comes to that, we'll do it. But right now, our focus is on Ukraine. Our focus is on trying to prevent President Putin from going even further. But it looks like he's going for everything he can get. And so we're doing what we said we would do all along. We're imposing massive costs. We're doing it with allies and partners. We're doing it together. We're doing it swiftly. And you've seen that already today.
Secretary Blinken, we do appreciate your time again tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Good to be with you.
Secretary Blinken just a short time ago. Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, tonight. And Cecilia, you pressed President Biden at the White House today. Are these series of sanctions, several of them now, are they working? Let's watch.
Sir, sanctions clearly have not been enough to deter Vladimir Putin to this point. What is going to stop him? How and when does this end? And do you see him trying to go beyond Ukraine?
No one expected the sanctions to prevent anything from happening. It has to show, this is going to take time, and we have to show resolve so he knows what's coming. And so the people of Russia know what he's brought on them. That's what this is all about. This is going to take time. It's not going to occur. He's going to say, oh my God, these sanctions are coming, I'm going to stand down. He's going to test the resolve of the West to see if we stay together, and we will. We will, and it will impose significant costs on him.
Cecilia, we heard the president there say it will take time to see if these sanctions have the intended effect. But of course, the world is watching as this Russian invasion unfolds right now.
And lives, David, are on the line as we speak. The president is really saying two competing things here. You heard him just say if Putin isn't stopped, he could be emboldened enough to try to go beyond Ukraine. On the other hand, he's also saying these sanctions that were issued today, severe though they are, aren't enough to stop Putin overnight. Look, officials here are telling me the reality. They know there is nothing they can do right now that is going to control what Putin does next. But they say over the next month, you're going to start to see Moscow increasingly isolated from the rest of the world. The White House says these are the most impactful and significant sanctions ever issued, David. But you also heard the president say today that he checked back with me basically in a month to see if these sanctions are working.
Cecilia Vega at the White House again tonight. Thank you, Cecilia. President Biden also revealing today moves involving U.S. troops. So let's bring in our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, live in Lviv, Ukraine again tonight. And Martha, the U.S. and NATO are now building up their presence in Eastern Europe throughout the region.
They certainly are. 7,000 more U.S. troops. They will go to Germany, and then they can be dispatched along NATO's eastern flank and join the others who are there. Fighter jets, assault helicopters. All of this is just for a show of force. There are no troops inside Ukraine. We have heard it again and again. The president said they won't be here. But we have also learned, David, there's no longer aircraft, surveillance and reconnaissance aircraft above Ukraine, so they have a less clear picture of what's going on here. David?
Martha Raddatz with us live again tonight. Martha, thank you. And one more striking image tonight. Inside Russia today, our team witnessing protesters in the streets demonstrating against Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Those protesters were then rounded up. James Longman reporting in from Moscow.
This individual just stood right next to us, David, just watching what was going on, and the police have just taken him off the street. Hundreds of people were on this street earlier here in downtown Moscow to protest the decision by Vladimir Putin to invade Ukraine. They don't feel that this is a man that represents their interests, and they're just taken away, put in these trucks over here. You can see the riot police in blue. There have been over 1,000 arrests across the country, in fact, at protests like these in over 50 cities. A large number of people here in Russia do believe what Vladimir Putin says because they've been watching and listening a lot of the state-controlled media. But for these mostly young people here, it takes a special kind of bravery to protest in Vladimir Putin's Russia, especially on the day that he goes to war. David?
What happens when you speak out against Putin? James Longman, our thanks to you. Martha, Cecilia, Ian, our thanks to you all. Our coverage of Ukraine and Russia for tonight. To the other major news this Thursday evening, 3 former Minneapolis police officers have been found guilty of violating George Floyd's civil rights. The verdicts in the federal trial coming in late today. Officer To Tao, Thomas Lane, and J. Alexander King, all on the scene when Derek Chauvin kneeled on George Floyd's neck until he died. The officers failing to offer medical help. Tao and King also found guilty of failing to intervene. When we come back here tonight, this dangerous winter storm this evening from Texas right up into the Northeast. Authorities now warning of a very dangerous morning commute. Ginger standing by to track it. Next tonight here, this major winter storm from Texas all the way up to the Northeast. Chief Meteorologist Ginger Z back tonight. Hi, Ginger.
Hi, David. More than 30,000 customers in Arkansas alone without power because of up to 3/4 of an inch of ice. Mount Vernon, Arkansas. Look where it is now. I'm going to time this out for you because tonight that freezing rain and snow, and yes, the heavy rain on the southern end of it, is moving into the northeast. Pennsylvania, look at it, just kind of smothered in pink. That is that wintry mix. A lot of folks from New York City and northern New Jersey going to start as that wintry mix, but then transition to rain. Boston looks to stay in the snowy end of it, at least the winter precipitation. We'll be following it all throughout tomorrow night. David.
Drive carefully. Ginger, thank you. When we come back, when the potential next COVID booster shot could be ready. News tonight on the pandemic here and the possibility of a fourth COVID shot, essentially the second booster. Moderna executives signaling today that they believe their second booster could be needed this fall, particularly for vulnerable people as immunity wanes and if any potential new variants emerge. The company right now is developing a booster targeting both the Delta and Omicron variants. So far, the CDC only recommending another booster for the immunocompromised. When we come back here, the situation unfolding outside Kyiv. Let's go back to Ian Panel in Kyiv tonight. Ian, I know U.S. authorities are concerned about the fighting about 20 miles from where you are and about the potential for another wave of Russian attacks tonight.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, city authorities this evening saying that they are preparing for the defence of Kiev. And Ukraine's defence minister published a fiery, defiant speech tonight saying Ukraine is succeeding in resisting these Russian attacks. But he's also warning that the Kremlin is planning a new wave of attacks, including using paratroopers. This is going to get worse before it gets better. David?
All right. Thank you, Ian, and our entire team in Ukraine. Stay safe. Good night.